The worst part about living with Veronica wasn't the constant comparisons to Mackenzie or the subtle put-downs. It was the way she'd rifle through my things when I wasn't home, looking for ammunition to use against me later. My name is Raylan, and I learned early on to keep anything important hidden away from my stepmother's prying eyes. That's why the acceptance letter from Stanford was tucked safely in my locker at school, along with the scholarship notification that would change everything. Did you see what Mackenzie wore to school today? Veronica's voice drifted up from the kitchen as I quietly descended the stairs. That girl could wear a paper bag and still look like a model. I paused on the landing, my hand gripping the banister. Dad's grunt of acknowledgement barely registered over his morning paper rustling. Speaking of school, Veronica continued, I noticed Raylan's been spending an awful lot of time in the guidance office lately, probably trying to figure out which community colleges might accept her. My teeth clenched. If she only knew I'd just been awarded a full ride to Stanford. Something Mackenzie, with her mediocre grades and endless extracurriculars, couldn't dream of achieving. Morning, I announced, stepping into the kitchen. Veronica's perfectly made-up face twisted into what passed for a smile these days. Oh, sweetheart, we were just talking about you, she cooed. There's nothing wrong with starting at community college, you know. Lots of people do. Dad lowered his paper slightly. Leave her alone, Veronica. Raylan's grades are excellent. I'm actually heading to school early, I said, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. Kenny's giving me a ride. That boy, Veronica sighed. Don't you think you could do better? Mackenzie's dating the captain of the lacrosse team now. I bit into the apple instead of responding. Mom would have known exactly what to say in this situation. I could almost hear her voice. Kill them with kindness, baby girl, but never let them kill your spirit. The rumble of Kenny's truck saved me from further commentary. I grabbed my backpack and headed for the door. Don't forget Mackenzie's dance showcase tonight, Veronica called after me. We're all expected to attend. The morning air hit my face like a welcome slap as I jogged to Kenny's waiting truck. He leaned across the seat to push open the passenger door, his familiar grin warming me more than any coffee could. You look like you're plotting murder, he observed as I climbed in. Close. I got the letter yesterday. I pulled the Stanford acceptance from my bag, along with the scholarship notice. Full ride. Kenny's eyes widened. Holy shit, Ray. That's incredible. He pulled me into an awkward side hug, the gear shift digging into my ribs. We have to celebrate. Not yet, I said, tucking the letters away. I haven't told them at home. Veronica would lose her mind if she knew I got something Mackenzie didn't. You can't hide it forever, Kenny pointed out, pulling away from the curb. The ceremony's in 2 weeks. I know. I stared out the window at the passing houses. I just need to figure out how to handle it. At school, I headed straight for my locker, Kenny trailing behind me. As I spun the combination lock, a familiar voice carried down the hallway. Mom's being ridiculous about this showcase thing, Mackenzie was saying to her friends. Like, I know I'm good, but she acts like I'm auditioning for Juilliard or something. I glanced over my shoulder. Mackenzie caught my eye for a brief moment before looking away. Sometimes I caught glimpses of the sweet kid she'd been before Veronica's influence took hold, usually when her mother wasn't around to witness it. Speaking of your mom, Kenny whispered, incoming at 2 o'clock. Sure enough, Veronica's heels clicked purposefully down the hallway. She occasionally volunteered at school, mostly to keep tabs on both of us. I quickly shoved the letters into my locker and slammed it shut. Raylyn, dear, she called out, her voice honey-sweet with underlying vinegar. I was just dropping off some forms for Mackenzie's college applications. Shouldn't you be doing the same? I'm handling it, I replied, shouldering my backpack. Well, don't wait too long. Spots at the local college fill up fast. She patted my cheek condescendingly before turning toward Mackenzie's group. Kenny squeezed my hand. 2 more weeks, he whispered. Then you can tell everyone exactly where you're going. I nodded, but something in Veronica's tone had set off warning bells. She'd been too interested in my college plans lately, asking too many questions. As I watched her fawn over Mackenzie in the hallway, I couldn't shake the feeling that she knew something, or at least suspected it. Mom's voice echoed in my head again. Stay strong, baby girl. Your time will come. I just hoped I could hold out until then. I should have known something was wrong when Veronica made my favorite dinner. The lasagna sat before me like a red flag, her smile too wide as she passed the garlic bread. So, she began, carefully cutting her portion into precise squares. When were you planning to tell us about Stanford? The fork froze halfway to my mouth. Across the table, Mackenzie suddenly became very interested in her water glass. How did you— I have my ways, dear. Veronica dabbed her lips with a napkin. I must say, I'm disappointed you kept it from us. We're family, after all. Dad looked up from his plate, confusion written across his face. Stanford? Raylin, that's wonderful. It's not wonderful, Veronica cut in sharply. It's actually quite problematic. Problematic? I echoed, my appetite vanishing. Well, you see, Mackenzie has also applied to Stanford. Veronica reached over to pat Mackenzie's hand. And we've already made certain arrangements to ensure her acceptance. Mom, Mackenzie whispered, her cheeks flushing pink. Maybe we shouldn't— Hush, sweetie. Veronica's smile never wavered. The thing is, Raylin, having both of you there would be awkward, especially given the circumstances. What circumstances? Dad asked, his fork clattering against his plate. The donation we've arranged, Veronica explained smoothly. A substantial one, contingent upon Mackenzie's acceptance. But it would look rather suspicious if both stepsisters were admitted, wouldn't it? My blood ran cold. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying, Veronica leaned forward, that you need to decline your scholarship. It's the right thing to do for your sister. Stepsister, I corrected automatically, and you're out of your mind. Raylin, Dad started, but Veronica cut him off. Think about it logically. Mackenzie has been working toward this her entire life. Her dance career depends on connections she'll make there. Your academic interests could be pursued anywhere. I turned to Mackenzie. Did you know about this? She wouldn't meet my eyes. I knew Mom was handling my application, but— Of course she knew, Veronica interrupted. And she knows how important this is for her future. Don't you, sweetheart? Mackenzie nodded miserably. This is insane. I pushed back from the table. I earned that scholarship, fair and square. Life isn't fair, dear. Veronica's voice hardened. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for family. Your mother would have understood that. The mention of Mom made something snap inside me. Don't you dare bring her into this. Enough! Dad's palm slapped the table. Veronica, you can't ask Raylin to give up her scholarship. That's not right. Nash, please. Veronica's hand found his arm. Think about what this means for Mackenzie, for our family's reputation. Besides, she turned back to me. If you don't decline the scholarship, I'll be forced to make a few calls. It would be a shame if the committee learned about certain indiscretions. What indiscretions? I demanded. Well, who's to say you didn't cheat on your SATs? Or perhaps plagiarize some essays? She shrugged delicately. Accusations like that can be very damaging, even if they're never proven. The room fell silent. Dad stared at his wife in shock, while Mackenzie seemed to be trying to disappear into her chair. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. Then, to everyone's surprise, especially my own, I smiled. You know what, Veronica? Thank you. She blinked, clearly thrown off guard. What? Thank you for finally showing your true colors, for proving everything I've suspected about you all these years. I picked up my plate. And thank you for making what happens next so much easier. Is that a threat? Veronica's eyes narrowed. No, I said calmly. It's a promise. I carried my plate to the kitchen, my hands steady despite the rage burning through my veins. Behind me, I could hear Dad demanding explanations and Mackenzie's chair scraping back. "Ray, wait!" Mackenzie called, following me to the kitchen. "I'm sorry. I didn't know she would—" "Save it," I cut her off. "You never know anything, do you? You just stand there and let her do whatever she wants." "That's not fair!" "Oh, life isn't fair!" I threw Veronica's words back at her. "Isn't that what your mother always says?" I headed for the stairs, pausing only when I heard Dad's raised voice from the dining room. "How could you even suggest something like that?" For the first time in years, I felt something like hope. Maybe Dad was finally starting to see through Veronica's perfect facade. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to help that facade crack completely. In my room, I pulled out my phone and texted Kenny. "You're right. I can't hide it anymore. But I'm done playing defense. Time to fight back." His response came immediately. "Whatever you need, I'm in." I smiled again, but this time there was nothing nice about it. Veronica wanted to play dirty? Fine, game on. Kenny's bedroom had always been my safe haven, but today it was our war room. Papers and documents spread across his floor as we pieced together Veronica's scheme. "Look at this," I said, holding up a bank statement I'd found in Dad's office. "Large withdrawals, all in the last 3 months. Way more than what they're saying is a donation." Kenny whistled low. "That's serious money. Your dad knows about this?" "He signs whatever Veronica puts in front of him." I ran my fingers through my hair in frustration. "But these numbers don't add up to just college donations." "What do you mean?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Mackenzie. "Mom's been in your room again, looking for something." "Of course she is," I muttered, showing Kenny the message. "She's probably trying to find my acceptance letter." "Good thing it's in your locker." Kenny gathered the papers into neat piles. "But Ray, what's your actual plan here? You can't just stand up at the ceremony and accuse her of being evil." I pulled out Mom's old journal from my backpack. "Actually, that's exactly what I'm going to do, but with proof." The leather-bound book had been my mother's, filled with her neat handwriting, documenting everything from recipes to financial records. She'd been an accountant, and old habits died hard. "Before she got sick," I explained, flipping through the pages. "Mom noticed something off about Dad's business accounts. Veronica was working as his office manager back then." Kenny leaned in closer. "What kind of something?" "Missing money. Small amounts at first, then bigger ones. Mom was building a case, but then—" I swallowed hard. "Well, she never got to finish it." "Holy shit," Kenny breathed. "You think Veronica's still doing it?" "I know she is." I pulled up a spreadsheet on my laptop. "I've been tracking the withdrawals since I found Mom's journal last year. The pattern's the same, just bigger numbers now." A knock at Kenny's door made us both jump. His mom poked her head in. "Raylan, honey, your father's here." Dad stood awkwardly in the living room, looking more uncertain than I'd seen him in years. "Can we talk?" he asked. Kenny squeezed my hand before I followed Dad outside to his car. "About last night," he began once we were seated. "Veronica explained everything. She says she was just trying to protect Mackenzie's future." "By destroying mine?" "No, that's not—" He sighed heavily. "She's withdrawn her suggestion about the scholarship. You don't have to give it up." "How generous of her," I said flatly. "Did she mention the money she's been stealing from your company?" Dad's head snapped toward me. "What are you talking about?" "Mom knew," I said quietly. "Before she died, she was tracking discrepancies in the accounts. Veronica's been embezzling for years, Dad. The college donation? That's just her cover for moving bigger amounts." "That's a serious accusation," he said, but I could see doubt creeping into his expression. "Mom kept records." I pulled out photocopies of her journal pages. "And I've been keeping my own. Check the business accounts yourself if you don't believe me." He took the papers with trembling hands. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Would you have believed me over Veronica?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "The scholarship ceremony is in 10 days, I said. "The board members will all be there, including Mrs. Stevens from the bank. I'm going to expose everything." "Raylin, wait!" "No, Dad, I'm done waiting. Mom tried to handle this quietly, and look what happened. Veronica needs to face consequences. She's my wife, he protested weakly. And I'm your daughter. When was the last time you remembered that? I got out of the car before he could respond, but not before seeing him open Mom's journal pages with shaking hands. Back in Kenny's room, I found him on the phone. Yeah, she's back, he said to whoever was on the line. Here she is? He handed me the phone. It's Mackenzie. I hesitated before taking it. Hello? I want to help, Mackenzie said without preamble. Mom's gone too far this time. What she's doing to you, what she's been doing to your dad, it's wrong. Why should I trust you? Because, her voice cracked slightly, I found some things in her office. Things about your mom, about her illness, and some missing insurance papers. Ray, I think Mom might have. My blood ran cold. Come to Kenny's. Bring everything you found. I hung up and met Kenny's concerned gaze. Still think I'm going too far with this plan? I asked. He shook his head slowly. No. Now I'm wondering if we're going far enough. I pulled out my notebook and started a fresh page. The scholarship ceremony wasn't just about my future anymore. It was about justice. For Dad, for Mackenzie, and most importantly, for Mom. The manila envelope Mackenzie brought shook in her hands as she laid it on Kenny's desk. Her mascara was smeared, evidence of tears she'd tried to hide. I found these while looking for my birth certificate, she said, spreading out the contents. They were hidden in a false bottom of Mom's filing cabinet. Insurance documents, medical records, and letters spread across the surface. One caught my eye immediately, Mom's life insurance policy. She changed the beneficiary, I said, scanning the document. 2 weeks before Mom died. It was supposed to go to me for college, but Veronica made it payable to Dad instead. There's more, Mackenzie whispered. Look at the medical forms. Kenny leaned in closer. These medications, they're not what your mom was prescribed. No, I confirmed, my throat tight. They're not. These would have made her worse, not better. Mom was in charge of her medications, Mackenzie said. She insisted on it, said she wanted to help, to be part of the family. The implications hung heavy in the air. Kenny's hand found mine under the desk, squeezing tight. We need to take this to the police, he said. Not yet, I replied. We need more proof. Right now it's all circumstantial. Mackenzie pulled out her phone. I recorded something last night, after dinner, when Mom was in her office. She pressed play. Veronica's voice filled the room, sharp and clear through a phone call. Of course the money's clean. No one's noticed for years. Nash signs whatever I put in front of him. Just like with Harper's Insurance. Yes, the scholarship ceremony is handled. No one will question a thing. Holy shit, Kenny breathed. There's something else, Mackenzie said, her voice barely audible. I found this in Mom's old papers. She handed me a letter in Mom's handwriting. The date was 3 days before she died. My dearest Raylin, I read aloud, my voice shaking. If you're reading this, something has gone wrong. I've discovered discrepancies that go beyond simple theft. Veronica isn't who she claims to be. The documents are in my blue notebook, hidden. Hidden where? Kenny asked when I stopped reading. I don't know. The letter ends there. I looked at Mackenzie. Did you find a blue notebook? She shook her head. But Mom, Veronica was asking about a notebook last week. She seemed really anxious about it. A memory suddenly clicked. The attic, I said. Mom used to hide Christmas presents in this old trunk up there, behind the ventilation panel. We need to look, Kenny said, standing up. Now. You can't. Mackenzie grabbed my arm. Mom's home, and she's been watching you like a hawk. Then you have to do it, I said. She won't suspect you. Mackenzie straightened her shoulders. Okay, I'll look tonight. Be careful, Kenny warned. If she catches you. She won't, Mackenzie said firmly. I'm done being her puppet. My phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Stevens, the scholarship committee chair. Can we meet tomorrow? Need to discuss your presentation for the ceremony. Perfect, I said, showing them the message. That gives us time to organize everything. What if we can't find the notebook? Mackenzie asked. Then we use what we have, I replied. The insurance documents, the medical records, your recording, the bank statements. It's enough to start an investigation. Kenny began gathering the papers. What about your dad? He's been reviewing the documents I gave him. He texted earlier asking about Mom's journal entries. I pulled out my phone to show them. He's finally asking questions. Mom's going to destroy you, Mackenzie said quietly. She'll do anything to keep this quiet. No, I corrected her. She'll try to destroy me. But Mom taught me something important before she died. The truth always comes out. I picked up Mom's unfinished letter, running my fingers over her familiar handwriting. We just have to be brave enough to tell it. Kenny pulled me into a hug, and after a moment's hesitation, Mackenzie joined us. I'm sorry, she whispered, for everything, for not seeing it sooner. You see it now, I replied. That's what matters. My phone buzzed again. Veronica. Where are you? We need to discuss your speech for the ceremony. Game face on, I muttered, showing them the text. Everyone know what to do? They nodded. Mackenzie gathered her evidence into her bag, hands steady now. Kenny saved copies of everything to his computer. And I typed back a response that would make Mom proud. Of course, Veronica. I've been working on something special. You're going to love it. As I headed home to face my stepmother, Mom's words from her letter echoed in my mind. The truth is coming, Veronica, and this time, you can't stop it. 6 days until the ceremony, 6 days to find the notebook, 6 days until everything changes. The morning of the scholarship ceremony dawned bright and cold. I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting the blue blazer Mom had worn to her college graduation. The envelope in my pocket felt heavy. Mackenzie had found the notebook last night. You look beautiful, Dad said from my doorway. His eyes were red-rimmed, like he hadn't slept. Can we talk? Before everyone gets up? I followed him down to the kitchen. The morning silence felt thick with anticipation. I checked everything, he said, pouring coffee with shaking hands. The accounts, the transfers, the insurance documents. Even called your mom's old doctor. And? You were right, about all of it. He slumped into a chair. I've been such a fool, Raylin. Such a blind, stupid fool. Dad? No, let me finish. He pulled out a worn envelope. I found this in my office safe. It's from your mom, dated the day she died. I never opened it. Veronica said, she said it would only make the grief worse. I took the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single page, covered in Mom's increasingly shaky handwriting. Nash, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if I'm gone, it wasn't the cancer that did it. Check the blue notebook, check the medications. Most importantly, protect our daughter. Veronica is... The letter ended in a jagged line, as if her hand had been jarred while writing. I've called the police, Dad said quietly. They're coming to the ceremony today. Detective Rivera wants to be there when you make your presentation. Footsteps on the stairs made us both freeze. Mackenzie appeared, already dressed for the ceremony. Mom's up, she whispered urgently. She's been in her office all night. Probably destroying evidence, I muttered. No, Mackenzie smiled slightly. I replaced everything with photocopies last week. The originals are safe with Kenny. Dad stared at his stepdaughter in surprise. You've been helping? I should have helped sooner. She pulled out her phone. And I recorded everything from her office last night. She made some interesting calls. More footsteps. We quickly separated as Veronica swept into the kitchen, immaculate as always. Everyone's up early, she trilled. Excited for the big day? You could say that, I replied, meeting her gaze steadily. Her eyes narrowed slightly. I hope you've prepared an appropriate speech. Nothing too controversial. Oh, don't worry. I'll give everyone exactly what they deserve. Careful, dear, she said softly. Pride comes before a fall. Does it? I pulled out Mom's blue notebook. Or does karma? The color drained from Veronica's face. Where did you— Time to go, Mackenzie interrupted brightly. We don't want to be late. In the driveway, Kenny was waiting with his truck. Everything okay? He asked, taking in our tense faces. Perfect, I replied, climbing in. Through the rear-view mirror, I watched Veronica arguing with Dad by their car. She knows something's wrong, Mackenzie said from the back seat. She was shredding papers all night. Doesn't matter now, Kenny said, pulling out of the driveway. We have everything we need. My phone buzzed. Mrs. Stevens. Police are in position, ready when you are. The school parking lot was packed when we arrived. Students, parents, and board members mingled outside the auditorium. I spotted Detective Rivera, dressed casually but alert, speaking with Mrs. Stevens. Raylin! Veronica's voice cut through the crowd. She grabbed my arm, nails digging in. A word, please. She dragged me behind a column. Whatever you're planning, think carefully. You could ruin everything. Like you ruined my mother's chance to survive? Her face hardened. I did what I had to do. For my daughter. For our family. No, I pulled away. You did it for yourself. And now everyone's going to know exactly who you are. I'll deny everything, she hissed. It's your word against mine. Who do you think they'll believe? That's the thing about evidence, Veronica. I patted my pocket containing Mom's notebook. It doesn't care who believes what. Mrs. Stevens's voice came over the speakers. If everyone could please take their seats, we're about to begin. Last chance, Veronica warned. Back down now, or I'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your life. I thought about Mom's unfinished letter, about years of manipulation and lies, about justice long overdue. No, I said simply. You've done enough damage. It's my turn now. I walked away, leaving her seething behind the column. Kenny and Mackenzie waited by the auditorium doors, Dad just behind them. Detective Rivera caught my eye and nodded slightly. Ready? Kenny asked, squeezing my hand. I took a deep breath, feeling Mom's presence stronger than ever. Ready! The auditorium doors opened, and with them, the path to truth I'd been waiting years to tell. The auditorium lights felt impossibly bright as Mrs. Stevens approached the podium. Veronica slid into her seat in the front row, her perfect smile fixed in place. Dad sat beside her, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Today, we celebrate excellence, Mrs. Stevens began. But before we announce this year's scholarship recipients, we have a special presentation from one of our top students. Veronica's smile faltered slightly. Raylin, would you please join me on stage? My heels clicked against the wooden steps as I climbed up, Mom's notebook secure in my hands. Kenny and Mackenzie gave me subtle thumbs up from their seats. Thank you, Mrs. Stevens, I said into the microphone. I'd like to talk about legacy today, about the things parents leave their children. I opened Mom's notebook. My mother was an accountant. She believed in numbers, in truth, in things that could be proven. Before she died, she left me several important lessons. The most crucial being, always keep receipts. The projector screen behind me flickered to life, displaying the first bank statement. These are records from Rice Family Enterprises, spanning the last 5 years. Notice these withdrawals? I pointed to highlighted sections. They total just over $2 million, money that disappeared under the management of one person. Veronica stood up abruptly. This is inappropriate. Please sit down, Mrs. Tucker, Detective Rivera called from the back. Let her finish. These funds, I continued, changing slides, were funneled through various accounts. Some went to personal purchases, some to offshore accounts, and some, I paused, meeting Veronica's eyes, went to paying for falsified medical records. A murmur ran through the audience. Dad's face had gone pale. My mother didn't die from her cancer getting worse. She died because someone deliberately switched her medications. I held up the medical records Mackenzie had found. Someone who stood to gain from her death. Someone who, 2 weeks before she died, changed her life insurance policy. That's enough! Veronica shouted, starting toward the stage. Two police officers moved to block her path. But it wasn't enough, was it? I asked, my voice steady. Because Mom found out. She kept records. She wrote letters. And on the day she died, she tried to warn my father. I played Mackenzie's recording from last night. Veronica's voice filled the auditorium. Of course I handled Harper. Just like I'll handle her daughter. Mrs. Tucker, Detective Rivera stepped forward. I'm going to need you to come with me. This is ridiculous. Veronica looked around wildly. Nash, tell them! Tell them I would never! But Dad was already standing, moving away from her. How could you? He whispered. How could you do this to my wife? To my daughter? Everything I did was for us, she screamed. For our family. No, Mackenzie stood up. Everything you did was for yourself, and I have the recordings to prove it. The police officers moved in as Veronica tried to run. The audience watched in shocked silence as they read her rights, as she fought and screamed accusations. The scholarship committee has reviewed all evidence, Mrs. Stevens said into the sudden quiet. We've also been in contact with the FBI regarding the financial fraud. Needless to say, the donation for Mackenzie's admission has been rescinded. I don't want it anyway, Mackenzie said clearly. I never did. I turned to the audience, to the stunned faces and whispered conversations. My mother taught me that truth matters, that justice matters, that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. And now, Mrs. Stevens stepped forward, I'm pleased to announce this year's full scholarship recipient, Raylan Rice. The applause started slowly, then built to a roar. Through my tears, I saw Kenny and Mackenzie cheering, Dad crying openly, Detective Rivera nodding in approval. As I accepted the scholarship certificate, Mrs. Stevens hugged me tightly. Your mother would be so proud, she whispered. Outside the auditorium, as Veronica was led to a waiting police car, Dad pulled me into a crushing embrace. I'm so sorry, he sobbed. I should have seen it, should have protected you. You can now, I said, hugging him back. That's what matters. Mackenzie approached hesitantly. They'll probably question me, too, about what I knew when I knew it. Tell the truth, I said. Mom always said it sets you free. Kenny wrapped his arm around my shoulders as we watched the police car drive away. So, he said, Stanford? I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. Stanford. The morning sun broke through the clouds, warm on my face. Somewhere, I could almost hear Mom laughing, could almost feel her pride. The truth had finally come out, just like she'd known it would. And now, finally, I could start living my own legacy. The police station coffee tasted like cardboard, but I gulped it down anyway. Detective Rivera spread photos across the interview room table. Images of Mom's medication bottles, bank statements, and a familiar blue notebook. Your mother was building quite a case, she said. If she'd lived another week, she would have exposed everything herself. That's why Veronica had to act fast, I replied, my voice hollow. She knew Mom was close to the truth. The door opened, and Mackenzie slipped in, her eyes red from crying. They're done with my statement. Dad's talking to the prosecutor now. Detective Rivera gathered her papers. I'll give you two a moment. As soon as the door closed, Mackenzie collapsed into the chair beside me. They found more evidence at the house. Mom. Veronica had a whole hidden safe in her office wall. Documents, fake IDs, everything. This isn't your fault, I said, reaching for her hand. I should have said something sooner. All those times she asked me to lie for her, to cover for her. Mackenzie wiped her eyes. I was so scared of disappointing her. Miss Rice? A suited woman appeared in the doorway. The prosecutor would like to speak with you about your testimony. The next few hours passed in a blur of statements, signatures, and legal terms I barely understood. By the time we emerged from the station, the sun was setting. Kenny waited in the parking lot, leaning against his truck. You okay? They're charging her with first-degree murder, I said. Among other things. Good. His jaw tightened. After what she did to your mom. The prosecutor says it's basically open and shut, Mackenzie added. Between the evidence Harper left, and all the new stuff they found, Dad appeared behind us, looking aged and broken. They want to check your mother's body for toxicology, he said quietly. They might exhume. No, I cut him off. She deserves to rest in peace. They have enough evidence without that. The school board called, he continued. They're holding an emergency meeting about the scholarship ceremony. They can't take it away, Kenny started angrily, but I shook my head. That's not it, Mackenzie said. They're offering me a different scholarship, a dance scholarship based on actual merit this time. She managed a small smile. To UCLA. Mackenzie, that's amazing. I hugged her impulsively. I thought, after everything, you'd hate me. You helped expose the truth. That's what matters now. Dad cleared his throat. There's something else. The insurance company called. They're reinstating your mother's original policy. The money. It's yours now. For college, like she wanted. Fresh tears spilled down my cheeks. Kenny pulled me close as Dad continued. I'm selling the house. Too many bad memories. Thought maybe we could find a place closer to Stanford, if you want your old dad nearby. What about the company? I asked. Under investigation, but they'll clear it eventually. Your mother's records helped prove I wasn't involved in the fraud. Maybe you'd consider helping me rebuild it? Once you're done with school? I'd like that. I smiled through my tears. My phone buzzed. Mrs. Stevens. Board meeting finished. Scholarship ceremony being rescheduled. Full press release tomorrow about Veronica. You've started quite the conversation about academic integrity. The local news wants interviews, Mackenzie said. They're calling it the biggest scandal in the school's history. Let them talk, Kenny said. You did the right thing. Dad's phone rang. His lawyer again. As he stepped away to take the call, Mackenzie touched my arm. I found something else in the attic, a video. Your mom. She made it for you, right before. She handed me a small USB drive. I haven't watched it. It felt private. My hands trembled as I took it. Thank you. There's going to be a trial, Kenny said softly. Are you ready for that? I looked around at my unlikely support system, my once distant father, my former enemy turned ally stepsister, my steadfast boyfriend. Then I thought of Mom, of her courage, her integrity, her final fight for truth. Mom was ready to expose everything, I said. Even knowing what it might cost her, I can be ready too. You're not alone this time, Mackenzie said firmly. Dad returned, keys in hand. The lawyer says we need to go through the house, document everything before they finish the investigation. Ready to head back? I clutched the USB drive, thinking of Mom's final message waiting for me. Actually, can we stop somewhere first? 20 minutes later, we stood before Mom's grave. I placed fresh flowers against her headstone. We did it, Mom, I whispered. We got justice, just like you wanted. The evening breeze rustled the trees, carrying with it a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. The truth was out. The fight was over. And somewhere, I knew, Mom was smiling. The courtroom fell silent as Veronica was led in, her designer outfit replaced by prison orange. She looked smaller somehow, her perfect facade cracked beyond repair. Her eyes found mine in the gallery, but I didn't look away. All rise, the bailiff called. The judge cleared her throat. Before I deliver the sentence, would the victim's daughter like to make a statement? I stood, unfolding the paper I'd prepared, then set it aside. Mom's words deserved to come from the heart, not a script. My mother taught me that numbers don't lie, I began. That's why she kept such detailed records. Even when she suspected what was happening to her, she documented everything. She fought for the truth until her last breath. Veronica shifted in her seat as I continued. But this isn't just about numbers or fraud or even murder. It's about the ripple effects of cruelty, about how one person's greed can devastate entire families. I glanced at Mackenzie, who nodded encouragingly from beside Dad. My mother's last words to me were, "Stay strong, baby girl." She knew what was coming. She knew she wouldn't survive Veronica's schemes, but she made sure the truth would. The judge leaned forward. And what justice would your mother want? She'd want Veronica to face consequences, yes. But more than that, she'd want healing for those left behind. She'd want her death to mean something. I turned to face Veronica directly. I don't hate you anymore. That's not what Mom would want. But I'll never forget what you did, and neither will anyone else. The judge nodded thoughtfully, before turning to Veronica. Would the defendant like to speak? Veronica stood shakily. I did what I thought was necessary. For my family. No, Mackenzie interrupted, standing beside me. You did it for yourself. Don't lie. Not anymore. The judge raised her gavel. Having considered all evidence and testimony, this court sentences Veronica Tucker to life imprisonment without possibility of parole for first-degree murder, with consecutive sentences for fraud and embezzlement. The gavel struck with finality. As Veronica was led away, she called out, "Nash, please!" But Dad turned away, his arm around Mackenzie's shoulders. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered with cameras and microphones. Kenny appeared, creating a path through them to his waiting truck. "No questions," he said firmly. "The family needs privacy." Back at our new house, smaller than the old one, but warmer somehow, Dad pulled out Mom's favorite wine glasses. "A toast," he said, pouring sparkling cider. "To Harper, to truth, to healing. To family," Mackenzie added softly. "The real kind." My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Stevens. "Stanford orientation materials sent. Your mother's scholarship foundation launches next week. You've created quite a legacy." Kenny squeezed my hand. Speaking of legacies, I pulled out Mom's video from my pocket. We'd been saving it for this moment, after everything was settled. Dad set up his laptop, and Mom's face filled the screen. She looked tired but determined, her smile still bright. "My dearest Raylan," she began, "if you're watching this, then everything I feared has come to pass. But knowing you, knowing your strength, I'm certain the truth has finally come out." Tears flowed freely as she continued. "Don't let anger poison your heart, baby girl. Use this to grow stronger, to help others, to build something good from something terrible. And know that I am so, so proud of you." She paused, her eyes twinkling. "And if Veronica's watching this from prison, yes, I knew exactly what you were doing. A mother's love always wins in the end." The screen went dark. Dad wiped his eyes. "She always was 3 steps ahead of everyone. The foundation will help other students like you," Mackenzie said. "Other families dealing with fraud or academic corruption." "Mom would love that," I smiled. "Using Veronica's stolen money to help people." Kenny raised his glass. "To Harper's legacy." "To Mom," I echoed. Later, on the porch swing, Kenny and I watched the sunset while Dad and Mackenzie argued good-naturedly over dinner plans inside. "You know what your mom would really love?" Kenny asked. "What's that?" "Seeing you happy. Finally free to just live." I touched Mom's locket around my neck, thinking of her final message. "Use this to build something good." I am happy, I realized. Not because of revenge or justice, but because the truth set us all free. Even Mackenzie. "Speaking of freedom," Kenny grinned, "ready for Stanford?" I looked through the window at my healing, transformed family. At the future Mom had fought so hard to protect. "Yeah," I smiled. "I'm ready for everything." The evening breeze carried the scent of Mom's favorite flowers from the garden. Somewhere between justice and healing, between ending and beginning, we'd found our way home. Just like Mom knew we would.